Hi, I'm Mike Messier. Welcome to Messier Mantra. Chris Sparling is our guest on this episode. He's a writer and director from Rhode Island, but he's had great success internationally. He's got some new projects out that we're going to talk about. Let's take a look at some photos of Chris right here on Messier Mantra. Hi, Chris. How you doing? Let's check this out. Writers Guild. We got Chris right here, and then looking good. What's the next one? Here we go. Nice close-up shot. And what's the third one? And in studio right now, courtesy of Getty Images, Chris Sparling. And that was you.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Two big-time actors, Matthew McConaughey and the actress.
Naomi Watts.
She was in a movie a long time ago that I just loved.
Mulholland Falls.
After that, it was the one that had like the weight, the 21 grams or something.
Oh, 21 grams, yeah.
Oh my God,
yeah.
What a great movie. And you're a big time player now. This is exciting, and we have some video later, courtesy of Getty Images, of you on the red carpet. And let's just talk about some of your projects, because you've been on the show before about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But now you're just hitting big time with Atticus Institute. Let's start with that one. Tell me a little bit about the Atticus Institute.
So that was something, so I've been writing, I've been doing what I do professionally for over 10 years now. And you know, part of what was always my plan was to write and also direct. And I'd been successful as a writer, and I wanted to transition into directing, but it's really tough to, you know, it's one, as you know, it's like it's easy to say I want to direct a movie, but that doesn't mean you necessarily get to, you know, and especially if you want to start, you know, if you expect someone to pay for it other than yourself, I suppose. And so I set out to make a movie that I could do very inexpensively, that I could direct, and that would be difficult for people to say no to, in terms of saying they want to get on board financially or, you know, otherwise. So I conceived of a fake documentary, because I knew to do that, at least half of the movie would be interviews. It would be standard, almost Discovery Channel, one-on-one, talking head interviews. So half my movie would be that, which is relatively inexpensive to shoot. I also knew that because I wanted it to look like a real documentary, I wanted to stay away as much as I could from familiar faces. So I'm casting the best people I could find, the best talents I can find, but kind of purposely steering away from stars.
Right.
So that would reduce the budget as well. And then what remains is the quote-unquote archival footage and photos, which again, because they're supposed to look like grainy, archival, just footage, you know,
from the 1970s.
From the 1970s, exactly. They're not supposed to be super polished looking. They're supposed to look kind of bad. Right. And so you kind of added all those things together. It became a pretty affordable way to make a movie, and I wanted to do a genre movie. So really, I just built the idea around that, the idea that you have, you know, that you had this institute in the I think it was 1960s actually, 1960s, that was at the forefront of things like study on telekinesis and pyrokinesis and all those different things. And there was an institute in, I think it was Duke University, that I kind of, not modeled it after, but just saw the kind of work they were doing. And I built out from there, but it takes a very supernatural turn. It doesn't just stay in that world of telekinesis. It goes to a very dark place. Right. So that, I mean, that's the long-winded way of saying the gist of why I set out to make this movie is that because I wanted to direct more movies, and I knew that to do that, I had to direct a movie first. And that was this.
Let's take a look at the preview, because this is an amazing preview, and I'm really happy to share it. So let's take a look at the preview of Atticus Institute by Chris Sparling.
What I'd like you to try to do is to move the wheel without actually touching it. Try to concentrate your mind. Focus your thoughts. Can you tell us your name, please?
Judith Winstead.
And when did you first realize you had certain abilities? You're bleeding, my God. Did you bite yourself? Why?
By this point, we'd researched hundreds of cases. Judith was different, though.
Can you please stop that,
Can you
Judith?
please stop that, please?
We'd really like to continue.
I'm trying to make you understand there's something happening.
Their abilities were godlike.
Stop.
After that, the government took over.
Plans were immediately put in place to contain the situation. What mattered now was national security.
That was the government's intention from the beginning, to weaponize her.
You don't get to play games with the devil. And if you do, you damn sure don't get to make the rules.
They're pushing it too far. They want to control everything, but they can't. It's too powerful.
Now, Chris, if I'm not mistaken, the actor in one of the last shots there was also in the Conjuring Annabelle series. I don't know his name off the top of my head.
It's possible. I know, well, two of the more known actors, and again, I was purposely trying to stay away from familiar faces, but still, there are some actors in there that have done a lot of work, you know, and they've kind of been supporting players. Like, for example, the woman that plays the lead female.
Amazing, yeah.
Judith Winstead. She is played by a woman named Raya Kihlstedt, who was in like Heroes or one of those shows, and she's she's worked forever.
Right.
And then even to say the one that plays Dr. West, William Mapother, he was in Lost. I mean, he's been, again, these are actors that have worked forever.
Working top-notch actors.
Yeah, John Rubinstein, a lot of, again, that was my goal, is to seek out people that maybe weren't immediately recognizable it wasn't like
want Kim Kardashian playing the lead.
Exactly. I didn't want someone, right. I didn't want Tom Cruise, but it's funny because William Mapother is actually Tom Cruise's first cousin. But I didn't want Tom Cruise, I wanted William Mapother, who was a fantastic actor, but not immediately like, oh, there's that guy.
It's not going to give away to the audience, this is a John Wayne movie or Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, and on top of it, like I said, the goal was to make it seem like it was real. So
well, you got me a little bit, Chris, because I was telling you that I watched this thing, and I thought it was a movie based on real events. Now, you didn't say in the trailer based on real events.
Right.
But, because I was thinking of things like Monarch, you know, the government, real things that the government's admitted to, the United States government admits to this crazy stuff.
Sure.
You know, and I was thinking that this is a movie about a real situation.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, you know, look, if you look at the tagline for the movie, it's the only government-confirmed case of possession, right? Because that's where it leads to, that's the dark place it leads to, from just straight-on telekinesis and ESP to, wow, this woman has these abilities because she's possessed.
Right.
And that's where things go awry, obviously. And they try to weaponize her, and that's, again, just a bad idea. So, you can say, that's the thing about movies, is that you can say whatever you want. Sure. It's part of the kayfabe. It's
the
part
magic
of
what if.
Yeah, exactly. It's all part of the magic of making the movie.
Right.
I made it all up.
Sure.
And that's I'm not like revealing any, that's just what it is. It's a movie.
The thing, it said at the end, from a producer, not all of them, but from a producer of The Conjuring and Annabelle, which has ties to Rhode Island.
The house, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and those movies I love. I just saw the most recent Annabelle origin story, you know, a week or so ago. So it's great to see that you're working with people that are really at the top of their games, and it's amazing stuff. And so this is the movie that you made. You wrote it because you've written things before. We talked.
Sure.
And if people want to see more about your history with Buried, and what was the thing you did for HBO?
For HBO.
It was about the boats, the ships, a U-boat or something. I thought.
The U-boat?
I'm getting. I don't know if that was. I thought you had something that was distributed by HBO even before Buried, but anyway. It'll come to me later, I'm sorry. But if people look back at our previous Messier mantra, we can see kind of that era of your work.
Sure.
It's driving me nuts now because we talked about it on the show. But now you said, okay, if I want to be not just a screenwriter, I want to be a director as well. I need to kind of put your personal stamp on a project, which is what you did with Atticus, and lowering the budget by using, you know, not Eddie Murphy and Mike Myers or whoever, but using these kind of top-notch actors without that name thing and face. So then what came next? What project came next? Was it Mercy?
Yeah, so Mercy was the product of me making the Atticus Institute. Like I said, it's a tough thing to, it's almost cliche to say, but what I really want to do is direct. And that's not to say that that's the case for me. I actually prefer screenwriting to directing, but it's also a path I'd like to follow. So by making the Atticus Institute, by it being relatively successful and well received, it allowed me to do my next film to direct, which was Mercy, which was a film I made for Netflix.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, frankly, it would have been a tough sell to get them to sign off on me directing the movie as well, in addition to writing it. But it, again, I established some credibility.
Let's take a look at the preview of Mercy, which if people have Netflix, they can see it right now, right?
They could watch it right now, yeah.
Awesome. Let's check out Chris Sparling's Mercy right here on Messier Mantra.
Listen, you have no right to get involved.
Your wife is suffering.
Get off my property.
These are my brothers. Half-brothers. This is Melissa.
Do you understand what's going on here?
I'm just here to help Brad through this.
When'd you get out?
A couple weeks ago. What was it this time?
What do you care, Ronnie?
Your mother got a lot of money. When she passes, that money goes to me.
I'm not ready to think that far ahead yet.
The hell does that mean?
What's going on? Shh. I think someone was in the house.
Brad?
Melissa! Go! Run! Come on!
What is happening?
They can't get in this room.
What's really going on?
Is this about the money? You make enemies, Charlie? Is that who this is? No. Who is it? Who's there?
Go! Run!
Okay, so after people watch Messier Mantra, they can go to their Netflix and check out Mercy. What's it like working with Netflix, Chris? How's that relationship?
It was, we were, believe it or not, I want to say we were the third or fourth Netflix original to come out, or to them to get on board with doing.
Right.
I mean, there's so many now. You look on Netflix, there's so many original films and TV shows. So it was probably a different experience than what it is now, but I mean, at the time, it was great. I mean, maybe it's still great. I hope it is. They were very hands-off. You know, were very much about allowing the filmmaker to make the movie and the producers to make the movie that they wanted to make. And you know, we ran into, this had nothing to do with Netflix, but we ran into our own issues in terms of we lost like a month and a half of our editing time due to
that's a lot.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. Yeah, and we had, you know, again, to their credit, Netflix, they gave us a delivery date of when to turn the movie in, and they were, you know, they were a little bit flexible with it, but you know, to be fair, that's when they needed the movie by, and so we kind of had to scramble. And I think, you know, I like the way the movie turned out. But there are things about it that, I mean, just frankly, were out of our control because we had a month and a half less time in the editing room. But it's okay. That's not me making excuses for it. I think the movie still turned out well. Was there a situation that you can talk about that maybe people can learn from? Like, was it what happened that made you lose 6 weeks of editing? I mean, it was a personal situation, so I don't want to get too much into it. It wasn't to do with me. It was just other people involved in the editing process. We'll just say that. You know, totally unrelated to the movie. Just things happen. The human factor, and it wasn't anything. It was nothing that. It wasn't like someone being difficult. It was. It just truly just life kind of happened in the middle of post-production. And that's one thing that the best laid plans of you know, mice and filmmakers and people don't realize that, you know, what if, blah blah blah, someone gets sick, somebody passes away, somebody. Whoever, you know, someone's going through a divorce, whatever it could be, is the human factor. Yeah. And when you're making a schedule, whether it's a small budget film or a big budget film, that's one thing that always seems to get passed over, doesn't it? Like, yeah, I mean, it's exactly. This is it's easy to look at the finished product and just think that's what it is, and that there's, you know, maybe you can You can read into the fact that there's a few people behind that went into making this sort of thing. But there's a massive number of people, even on a small film.
Right.
There's a ton of people that are involved in all different levels. There's so many moving parts constantly. It's constantly changing, and it really is the best example of, when they say like trying to build the plane while you're flying it.
Right.
Because there are so many things that can go wrong and do go wrong in between, like you said. I mean, any of the human factor things that might get in the way, anything to do with cast falling out and scheduling conflicts, and now all of a sudden you're constantly shifting and everything else, and by the end of it, you kind of have, here it is. This is where it nets out.
Right.
In your mind, it might have been this or that, but when all of those factors, when they've come together at the end, and you shake out all of the other stuff that maybe didn't work out that you wanted it to, this is what it nets out to.
I remember a project I worked on years ago, Blood Sugar Sedace, that I wrote and directed, and we just basically forgot a shot. Mm-hmm. Wasn't a scene, but a shot. And my good friend and DP, Tim Labonte, said, hey, can we set up something and shoot that? And I said, we had a studio for several shooting days, 11 shooting days. We had the actors. We forgot to get the shot. We don't necessarily need it. Let's make the movie without the shot. Mm-hmm. Because my feeling was the integrity of what we created at that moment was this. Yeah. And if we forgot something, we forgot something. And if it had been crucial to the story, I would have gone through the process of getting the shot. But I didn't want to disregard or disrespect what we had created in that moment.
Sure.
And then let's talk about Sea of Trees. This might be, you've worked on some big stuff, obviously. A lot of people will associate you for a long time with Buried, which is, I'm sure, great, because that's Ryan Reynolds really doing a masterful job of, man in a coffin.
Yeah, he does a great job in the movie.
Yeah, but Matthew McConaughey has just been a fantastic actor now, going on a whole generation back to, a lot of people think of him for Dazed and Confused, and just a lot of great movies he's done. The one where he played the lawyer was fantastic. I think, I'm trying to remember the name of that one too. But
I think it's The Lincoln Lawyer.
Yeah, The Lincoln Lawyer, but even before that, based on the Grisham book.
I think it was The Lincoln Lawyer.
Was it that one? Yeah, where, Imagine If She Was White. That was what I'm talking about. Yes, was that The Lincoln Lawyer?
I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah, he's great. So, now you wrote and directed Sea of Trees, right?
No, I did not direct Sea of Trees.
Okay.
Gus Van Sant directed Sea of Trees.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah.
So he's huge too. He's done some big stuff.
Yes, and also a Rhode Island connection. He went to RISD.
Nice. And let's take a look at the preview of Sea of Trees, because I'm sure you've got to be very proud of this. And Naomi Watts, like we said.
Sure, yeah.
21 grams, incredible actress. And let's take a look at the preview of Sea of Trees, written by screenwriter and director Chris Sparling.
So I have another showing tomorrow. How about a quick lunch and I can pick up something on the way over?
Tomorrow I'm pretty busy.
You don't care. Your mind's always somewhere else.
What about you, Arthur?
My article?
Yeah.
It's a fantastic article. Have you read it, Joe? No.
She doesn't read my work.
Well, you think it's right that your wife does all the heavy lifting so you can pretend to be an intellectual?
Here we are, the lake house.
I love that lake.
Yeah, you did.
It's my paradise.
Why can't you just be happy for me?
Because I'm too busy feeling bad for myself.
The MRI detected a small mass.
How risky is the surgery?
It's a highly invasive procedure.
Do you believe in God?
I'm a scientist. God is more our creation than we are his.
If God is now waiting for you on the other side, who is?
All the anger and the pretending and the fighting, it all got put on hold.
It is during our darkest times that our loved ones are closest.
I don't want to die, Arthur. In some cold, empty room surrounded by people who are only there because it's their job to be.
Things are not what they seem here.
There's always that moment, life-changing moment.
We can go back there whenever you want to.
Promise me.
I promise.
Do you love her?
More than anything on earth.
Writer of the piece, Chris Sparling. You must have. How do you feel when you get to see, like, even 2 or 3 years later, the preview of the movie that you wrote, and here it is. It's come to fruition. People have seen it. How does it make you feel?
I mean, it's incredible. I mean, that was a movie that, like I said, I didn't direct that, but I was one of the producers on it as well. So like, there's an added sense of involvement. I mean, as a screenwriter, I've been pretty lucky that I've remained involved with a lot of the projects that I wasn't when I was just quote unquote just the screenwriter, because that's not always the case. Sometimes screenwriters are kind of like, all right, well, they're kind of like, well, thank you for the script, and now we're going to go make the movie.
Right.
So on two different levels, really. I mean, I was able to be involved with that project much further than I would in the past, just being the writer. But it's great. I mean, to be on set, to see it happening and coming together, and to have people like that involved in the project, and then for it to premiere the way it did. It premiered at Cannes 2 or 3 years ago, and it was just a big, massive red carpet premiere, and it was overwhelming. And so I mean, yeah, it's always a bit surreal, because
right.
you know where you were when you were writing these particular things, both physically and even emotionally. And I mean, that was such a departure for me, that movie in general, as you could probably tell from the trailer. I mean, up until that point, I'd kind of lived in the thriller or horror space.
Right.
And so to just do something totally different and put out just a straight drama, it was a big, I wouldn't say risk, because I mean, it's not ultimately, but it's a little bit of one. We were kind of known for one thing, and you've been successful at one thing. Right. To try to go in a very different direction, either nothing could happen, and you've wasted quite a bit of time and effort.
Sure.
Or it could, I don't know, it could really backfire.
Right.
And so it was gratifying in a lot of ways to see it come together the way it did.
Now, did you write the script first, and then somehow you or your representation approach Gus Van Zant's representation? Did you see him at a party, or
no,
how did that connection happen?
So first it was that Gil Netter is a very, very prolific producer I've worked with a handful of times by this point, but that was the first time we'd worked together. My agent got Gil the script, and Gil loved the script, and as someone, that's one of the powerful. That's what makes it, I think, separates a lot of producers in terms of it's such a weird, almost amorphous term, because there are a lot of different aspects of producing. Right. And Gil is certainly a producer. That part of what he does really well is, in addition to story and everything else, he's just been in the business for a long time, and he's made really great relationships with a lot of actors, and so it's really kind of producers that have the inroads to particular camps, if you will. And Gil was able to get it into the hands of people like Matthew, and Matthew's reps, and Naomi's reps, and then Gus's reps, and other people as well. I mean, there were other people that were in the running for that movie that were also very big names, right, that wanted to do it. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that process went. And then I stayed on board as a producer alongside Gil. And yeah, I mean, it's shot, which was also great because it's shot in Massachusetts. A big part of it, so it was local.
What city in Mass? Do you remember?
We shot at Purgatory Chasm. That's where majority of the forest scenes take place.
Yeah, and people can walk up there, or get up there somehow and then walk around. I've done that. It's cool. Yeah. It's funny. I remembered the movie I was thinking of from McConaughey. It was actually A Time to Kill.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right.
Going back
I apologize. Yeah.
97, 96.
Yeah.
But my point of mentioning that movie was, this is a guy who for 20 years now has been, or close to 20 years, one of the faces when we think of big time actors. Mm-hmm. You think of your Matt Damon's, your Brad Pitt's, your Matthew McConaughey's. He's right in that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, this was part of the quote unquote reconnaissance, when he had kind of this kind of stratospheric rise to his career in things like you described, movies like that, then Amistad, and all these other big movies. And then there were a series of movies that didn't do well for him, a lot of romantic comedies and he kind of fell out of favor a bit. And then all of a sudden really turned his career around with, I think, Dallas Buyers Club.
Oh, yeah.
And so all of a sudden he was back very much in that A-list celebrity camp.
It's a crazy business. It's like there's a guy right now who's got a big movie out, Peanut Butter Falcon, I believe. One of the stars of that movie is having resurgence.
Sure, yeah.
And he had some trouble with his, personal life and so forth, and here he is. And it's like that. One movie and you're back.
Yeah, and it's really, for better or for worse, it is an industry that it's tough to go away.
Right.
For good. Again, for better or for worse.
And or one tweet and you're done.
Yeah,
unless
true.
you're the president.
Well.
So we've kind of covered some of your creative successes, and just to wrap things up with the videos, because then I want to kind of do a deep dive into some of the process of how you get to these accomplishments. But let's see the payoff for all the hours you put into the coffee house, or the 3 o'clock in the morning you're writing a script, or your printer's broken, all the things that a screenwriter and director go through. But the payoff are evenings like this. Once again, from Getty Images, all credit to them. We have a video of you at the Sea of Trees premiere, I believe, and you're with Naomi Watts, and you're with Matthew McConaughey, and all these wonderful people. And we'll indulge in this video because this is a lot of fun. Here you are on the far right, and Naomi and Matthew McConaughey, and that's some pretty. And who are the other? Are those the producers with you guys?
That's Gus Van Sant to the far left. The guy to my left, or right on the screen, is Casper Tuxon. He's the DP. The guy to the far end is Ken Cow, who was one of the other producers / financier.
And Naomi looks sensational as always. Her earrings are probably worth more than my entire wardrobe, but that's okay. Besides the Avalonia Festival t-shirt. But yeah, she's looking amazing, and this is just a beautiful theater. And what theater is this? This is in LA?
No, this is in Cannes.
Cannes, thank you. Unbelievable. And what a thrill. I mean, what a night that must have been for you.
It was surreal. I mean, I've been lucky, part of kind of the spoils of it is that, by and large, my life is pretty mundane 95% of the time.
Right.
Especially, I choose to live in Rhode Island still, and I like it that way. I like to kind of live my normal life the way I did always.
Right.
And about 5 or 10% of the time, my life is kind of this. But it's like, so it's cool. I always enjoy it. I always think it's cool. But this was a whole new level. I've done red carpets before. I've done premieres before, and this was just giant in terms of the number of people taking your picture. And you could probably see it on my face. I was a bit just like...
Yeah. But I mean, let's break down this process. How does one, because I remember taking a class of yours, it's going back 10 or 12 years ago, at the Perishable Theater.
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, it was a fun class, learned a lot. And one of the things you recommended, as I recommended again, as I did the last time you were on the show, which is a book that you really recommended people get, which was The Writer Got Screwed But Didn't Have to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's been so long, but I remember the title for sure.
Right. And I remember you recommended that book, and I was actually in a Facebook film group, Jack's Film Bar, a group out of Jacksonville, Florida, and their Facebook group. And people were talking about entertainment law somehow. Like somehow it came up like a screenwriter, hey, I wrote this script, but how do I stop people from stealing my scripts? And different people, this lady, Sharon Cobb, who's very influential in the business, she wrote a book, and other people wrote, and I said, hey, there's a book that explains it all. The Writer Got Screwed But Didn't Have to, which right in the title, I mean, it's a great title for a book too, but you had all this type of information in your workshop all those years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, you're talking 10 or 12 years ago, I certainly remember doing it. It was a workshop I did I felt like I had amassed, even at that point, at least a fair amount of information about the business of screenwriting. So not just the craft.
Right.
I had some, not the success I can say that's been my career now, but I had some exposure to the industry by that point. And I felt like, I don't know, it just felt like something worth sharing. I mean, these were questions I think I certainly would have had a couple of years prior to that.
Sure.
And I thought some people might be interested to learn, because so much about screenwriting, especially when you get into, say, like seminars and stuff like that, and they are what they are, but so many are about craft.
Right.
And which is great, because that's actually where the emphasis should be. But sometimes it's easy to kind of, with all things related to Hollywood, there's kind of this, I don't know if you want to call it a patina of like, or a veneer, or of like, you know, all the glitz and the glamour, but and losing sight of the fact that at the end of the day, it's a business, and people working in this particular business treat it as such.
Right.
So kind of you do as well as a writer.
Get your fingernails dirty, and two words that no writer wants to hear: creative compromise.
Yeah, sure, that's part of it.
Yeah, and your workshop was very powerful, I thought, because I learned a lot of stuff, and like you said, sometimes as a writer, you want to think that I'm going to write this and I'm going to get all the big stars and everyone's going to love me. Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't always turn out that way.
No, it certainly doesn't. I mean, it's interesting because the industry is evolving fast.
Right.
Nowadays, especially because of the advent, well, not even the advent, it's not, these days it's just common, but it was the advent of newer and affordable technology. Whereas you go back 10, 15 years ago, the barriers to entry, I might have said this last time I was sitting with you, there were many. And it wasn't easy to just go make a movie. You know, you look at movies like Brothers McMullen and Clerks, and these are movies that you look at them now, and they could have been made nowadays for a fraction of what they cost then. I mean, Brothers McMullen, I believe, cost like $60,000 or $70,000 to make.
Right.
And that's not to say it wasn't a good movie. It was. But in terms of how much it physically would have cost to make that movie now, probably a third, if not even cheaper. So there's really, so what the larger point I guess I'm getting at is there's real value, I think, to having the opportunity now and acting on that opportunity to be able to produce your own stuff.
Right. And what's also interesting is just, you mentioned Brothers McMullen, I think Edward Burns, who writer-director. The second thing I think of is Michael McLone, who played his brother in that movie.
That's right, yeah.
And now, so many years later, I'm on Facebook, I see Michael McLone, Facebook requests, and suddenly I'm Facebook chatting with Michael McLone. And, 15, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have access, or the common, me, I wouldn't have access to someone who, I saw you in a movie, I thought it was great, and I watched She's the One, and here we are intermingling with this technology of the internet, which, it's been around forever now, too, 25 years, but still, that wall of this is the insiders club, this is the outsiders club, keep you. But some of these walls are coming down, or at least there's cracks in them.
Yeah, it's certainly in that aspect. I mean, because it was a very closed door. It still is a very closed door industry in that way. But there are, like you said, there are cracks that have formed that you get around gatekeepers and things like that. So if you're a young filmmaker, let's say, and I mean, you have to be realistic too, and this is part of the learning process, because everybody, and I don't mean just in this industry necessarily, but everybody always thinks when they're out of the gate that they're the thing, right? It's like every new college graduate, let's say, thinks they deserve to be, CEO, right? But like in time, you realize, okay, I need to pay my dues. I need to learn learn the ropes, essentially. And filmmaking certainly is no different, where you kind of come out of this thing. I hear all the time, well, I wrote a script, and it's like, that's great.
Yeah.
And so well, what's your advice? Write a lot more.
Right.
Or write a lot more scripts, many more.
Yeah.
Because chances are, I mean, unless you are this phenom, that it's very rare that you're going to find this person that wrote that one script that is going to blow the doors off of the world and set the world on fire. It's just that you're learning your craft, and chances are your script is a lot worse than you think it is.
Right.
And you need to practice.
Let me ask you this, Chris, and this is a debate that I'm almost sick of having, but because you're here, I want to get your take on it. What's your take on, does a script need or should be written on Final Draft? What's your opinion on that?
On that software?
Yes.
Oh, God, no. No,
Okay.
no. It's just a software.
Okay.
It's the one that's been around. It's the one I use. I mean, I should, full disclosure, I use Final Draft, but it's only because I've been doing this for a long time, and it was kind of the only one available, and I just stuck with it. No, it makes no difference. As long as it's formatted properly, and there are like probably a dozen softwares that will format it properly.
In your circles, do you find that if you have a script or someone else has a script that's presented in a non-Final Draft format, that script is given a hard time, or some executive somewhere will say, hey, you need to convert that to Final Draft?
Well,
or does that come up?
I should clarify, there's no Final Draft format. There's just a script format. Final Draft is just a software among many that will put your script into screenplay format. So no one's going to be able to look at a page necessarily and say this was written on Final Draft, or this was written on Fade In, or written on
Movie Maker.
Take your pick of all the different ones available. they all do the same thing. I mean, I would, if you're just looking for software now, I would actually probably dissuade you from Final Draft, not because it's good or bad. It's fine. It's great. It works fine, but it's expensive. So it's like, why get the expensive one? Get the cheaper one.
Well, that's interesting because your answer is different than what I thought, which is that it's got to be Final Draft or bust.
No, there's one element of where I'd say maybe it is a little beneficial to have Final Draft, but it really doesn't matter at the early stage in the game. Is that when it comes to scheduling and budgeting? Right. Because that a lot of times, not always. That's the thing is that. What I'm saying is actually only half accurate. A lot of the times is that you're going to have your line producer or whoever else, your AD, that's going to import the script. Right. And they're going to use their software but as far as I know, they can use other softwares as well, or they can convert it.
Well, that's what I was curious. Maybe at this point in the game, these different software programs can be converted, translated one to the other. Yeah. I just like Final Draft. I guess I'm a Final Draft holdout. I've had good luck with it. I like it.
At the end of the day, what you're submitting is going to be in a PDF anyway. Right. So that's going to be the ultimate format people are reading it from.
I guess my fear would be that I like those reports you can do on Final Draft.
Oh, yeah,
so we've gone deep into the woods with screenwriting stuff. For those that kind of bailed out, you can come back now. But now I guess the big overriding question for me to you, Chris, is how does a guy from Rhode Island, because a lot of people watching this show will be from New England, and they're writing scripts and they're doing things, but how does someone from Rhode Island, in this case you, and I know everyone's going to have a different story, of course, but and I know you went to LA for a while too. Mm-hmm. I would really tell people watch the first episode you did with me 2 years ago, but what would be your advice, not necessarily for someone to do exactly what you did, because that's impossible, but what would be your advice to the person out there watching who says, hey, I have 5 or 6 great scripts, I've won a couple awards, or I'm an actor, or whatever their thing is. How do they go from being in a small state like Rhode Island or Massachusetts or Connecticut to having a national presence or an international presence where they're working with people in LA or New York? Any tips you could give? Yeah, I mean,
I can go back to what I said a few minutes ago about the value in producing your own work. Right. There's certainly that option is available to you. Now, I say that, at the same time, there's also the fact that someone watching may say, dude, I have a script that takes place like on a spaceship and I can't make that myself. Right. Fair enough. But what you can do is you could actually back into writing something that you do plan to make yourself. That was the origin of Buried. I think if you'll go back to your previous episode, the origin of Buried was that I wanted to make a movie. At this time, I hadn't broken into the business. I'd written numerous scripts, and I finally said, well, I want to try to direct a movie that I wrote. So I have like $5,000 at this point in my life, back then, to say I can make a movie for $5,000. What movie can I make for $5,000? And that informed what script I wrote. Right. So now that's obviously one example to say like you can produce your own thing. Other ways are, this is the benefit of being, say, a screenwriter over maybe an actor or something else, where it is pretty important that if you really want to be an actor and work as an actor and make a go at it, you kind of have to be in LA or New York. Right. Because while you could obviously tape and send in your work and everything else, it's a constant process of auditioning and everything else. So you have to be there. As a writer, it's really about your work. Right. So it doesn't matter where that script comes in from per se. It doesn't matter if it's coming from Mars. It's there in someone's inbox. So a couple of things. I think the Blacklist has become a really great resource for writers, and I would encourage anyone watching to look into it. Okay. It's a submission site. There are numerous things out there nowadays, just like anything else. People try to make a buck, and you can't blame them. Right. So there's this cottage industry surrounding, between script gurus and contests and all these different things and submission services, claiming to be able to do all these different things for your career. So I would say first, kind of really do your homework with those to see which ones are worth your time, effort, and money to submit to. But I can tell you that the Blacklist is a legit one. Legit, okay, good. And the reason being is that there are real producers that are looking on that site. There are real agents, real managers that are scouring that site pretty regularly, looking for the work that's catching people's attention. And so if you're a writer, it didn't exist when I was coming up. I wish it had. But if you're someone that's saying, hey, I have this material, like you said, how can I get people to actually pay attention to it? And that's one way, because it is difficult. as I said, it is still a pretty closed door industry. So it is tough to get past gatekeepers to be like, oh, I'm just going to call up someone.
Right.
Chances are that that is not going to work.
No, I've had the Hollywood, I mean, years past, I don't think they even publish hard copy now, Hollywood Creative Directory.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hollywood Representation Directory.
Yep.
And I remember, about 8 years ago, I had written the first 7 pages of a script that I was tentatively titling Rocky 7.
Okay.
I'm like, and I wrote only 7 pages because I knew I'm going to waste my time here.
Sure.
If I continue to write Rocky 7 and don't have any consent from Sylvester Stallone and Associates, so I picked up the Hollywood Creative Directory. I found Sylvester Stallone's representation. I called them, left a message, and it was kind of I just said, hey, I'm starting to write a script. I think it's a good idea, but I'd like to know if this is even a possibility that I could write Rocky 7 before I even go further. I don't even want to waste, and I left and they actually called me back. Like Stallone's people called me back very politely. And the first question was, do you have any money for this? And I said, well, I'm sitting here with a $2 muffin in a coffee house in East Greenwich, Rhode Island, Felicia's, shout out. But I don't have any money to pay Sylvester Stallone. So the moral is, they politely told me not to do it, because I'd be wasting my time.
Your time, yeah.
So I basically went back to my script. I chopped out the Rocky character. I put in my own. I created a different character, and I wrote a script called "To Fight or Play Basketball," which had nothing to do with Rocky. Right. But there was still elements of basketball and boxing, and that script has won a couple of awards: Rhode Island International Film Festival, New England Award, and so forth. And then the kicker kind of is a couple of years after that script had been written, I see Creed. Now Creed came out, and so the guy, kind of like what you had done with your project Mercy or Atticus Institute, the guy who directed Creed had directed a previous film that was a big hit, and he got Stallone's attention, and he said, hey, I'd like to do a reboot of the Rocky franchise using Creed's son, and Creed was born. So I didn't have the foresight, or I wasn't in a position to do all that. I just had this vision of a Rocky type of thing.
Well, with the Ryan Coogler story, with with Fruitvale Station, that was a huge hit for him. And Michael B. Jordan, it started his career.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, where it's like, if you have the opportunity and the means to go and make something, it's at least a better chance it's going to get made if that's your goal.
Right.
And it's kind of it is a very blood in the water industry where it's like the sharks come.
Right.
When you have something that people think is of value, it's almost like the saying goes, nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden you go from being this person on the outside to all of a sudden you're in and everyone wants to know what you're about. And so that was one example of someone that went out, made a movie for a relatively modest budget, all things considered, and made a great movie. And now all of a sudden, it happens. And that's what makes this industry as crazy and sometimes funny as it is. It's different from other industries in that, more standard, like banking. Like, you're not going to go from being a teller to the vice president of a major bank. That doesn't work that way. It's not, even if you do something amazing, you save the bank $1 million, $2 million.
From a robbery or something.
Yeah, it's like you still don't then become the VP.
Right.
Whereas in this industry, you could go from being truly someone that's making films that no one's heard of, these no-but shorts, anything, right? So all of a sudden it catches fire, and now you're getting handed the keys to the car. You're like, I'm thinking of like David Sandberg did it with the short Lights Out, where he made a great spooky little short film that like all of a sudden the internet was ablaze about, and so then he got the opportunity to make a feature out of it. Then made. Then he just did Shazam. He did one of the Annabelle movies, in fact.
Yes.
So and with Coogler, it was like he did Fruitvale Station, which again everybody loved, and then he gets to do Black Panther and Creed, and
yes.
So you see that happening a lot, and I think people should be encouraged by that.
Even Vin Diesel, I think, put himself on the map for producing and directing a short film that I think it was called Pitch Black, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I am mistaken. But
was that the short? Whatever. I know he was in the movie Pitch Black, certainly.
Right. Maybe, but I think maybe it was before that he did a short that led to Pitch Black, something like that. But Vin Diesel more or less put himself on the map because he was like, no one's hiring me for these lead roles, and I want to be the guy. So
yeah. It's again, it's far easier said than done. I mean, I don't mean to sound so flippant about it, to be like, oh, go make a movie. And also, while you're at it, make it great.
Right.
That's a very difficult thing to do. But it is at least, it's a path.
Right.
It's a path. And some people may be saying, well, I don't want to be a filmmaker, I want to be a screenwriter. Fair enough. And maybe the answer there is, well, find a filmmaker that maybe you want to work with and start there.
And what you just said is huge, because a lot of people, as an acting coach, I find this a lot. I work with, people who are actors who are just getting started. Like they literally haven't done anything. And they might be 30 years old, they might be 20 years old, they might be 50, 60. And they don't know where to start. And, but they kind of have these aspirations of being a big star. And I'll say kind of what you're saying, which is, hey, what's to prevent you from taking, if nothing else, taking your smartphone and recording a monologue on your smartphone and putting that on YouTube. Now, as simple as that sounds, a lot of people won't even do that.
Right.
Which is very frustrating for me, because as an acting coach, I say, well, that's a baby step, but that's also a huge step. If that's the first step, that's a huge one.
Yeah, sure.
And a lot of people won't take that. And what you just said about the screenwriter who's maybe even they've written a 5-page script, every city in the country, whether it's Providence, Tallahassee, Florida, New York City, Boston, there's a film group somewhere meeting within a 50-mile radius.
Yeah, of course.
And you can go with your script in hand, bring 10 copies. And if you mingle with all these filmmakers at this, hypothetical networking event, by the end of the night, someone's probably going to bite.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't mean to make it sound like it's easy to do.
Right.
None of it is easy. It's like they say, if it's easy, everyone would be doing it.
Right.
But if it's something you're passionate about and you really want to see, it's frustrating. As a screenwriter, it is frustrating because, unlike, say, being a novelist, when you're done with a novel, even if you're not, say, a published novelist or whatever, you have something that's yours. That's the form it's always going to be in. Sure, it could be adapted into a movie, but that's a separate animal.
Right.
You have a book. And whereas with a screenplay, you have a screenplay, but until it becomes a movie, it's not viewed as a piece of literature, let's say.
Right.
It's kind of it's viewed as a blueprint of a film.
Right.
So it is at times, if you're a screenwriter, frustrating to be an unproduced screenwriter, because you want to see, as you were asking me before, what is it like, not just to say to go to a premiere, that's what it is, but to be sitting in the audience and watching these people that, work you've admired for years, saying your words, acting out the things that you said, and again, going back to an earlier statement, like knowing in a fundamental way what those things meant to you. And now you're sharing it with all these people who are going to adopt it for it to mean something maybe different to them. You don't really get to fully appreciate that from just the script.
Right. I would imagine, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but something like Sea of Trees, where you've got a guy like Gus Van Sant, McConaughey, the awesome Naomi Watts. I mean, I would think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but seeing the finished product, I would like to think, for you, on behalf of you, that this is better than you would have imagined it when you were writing it.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, it's like you can't help it. I think most writers, and tell me if you kind of operate the same way, is that when you're writing, you're seeing the movie in your head.
Right.
So you kind of have a very specific idea of what you think the movie should be and look like and sound like. And so it's never, if you're not directing that movie, and even if you are, like I said earlier, it still might not end up netting out exactly as you perceived it to be or thought it to be. But when you have another person taking the reins, it's always going to be different than as you imagined it.
Right.
So you kind of always have to kind of reconcile that in a certain way. And with Sea of Trees, there were elements about it that I found a bit different. While it was true to the script, say tonally, it was at times very different than I envisioned it. But it was, it's just it's again, you recognize the amount of work that goes into putting a movie on screen. From going from page to screen, and maybe you have more of an appreciation of it for other movies as well than, say, maybe the casual moviegoer, because it's hard, and you do appreciate the art form beyond just what the final product is, I think.
One of the short films I did recently, The Impeccable, I had written it, and really it came out better than what I had written because the actors, Ashley Shea is the lead, Naria Zakarian, and a new guy, Adam Lim from Base, they put life into these characters. And my DP, Tim Labonte, was at the top of his game. I was, as the writer-director, I was going through a rough time in my personal life. There had been some deaths in my family and so forth, and I was not feeling good, thanks. But it's amazing when you have the right team, the right people, together, they can compensate even if the director is not doing so good. But everyone else kind of lifted the project up. Now I want to give you an opportunity, Chris, to talk about some of your new projects on the horizon. And you haven't even given me heads up on what they will be, but we've got about 7 minutes left. So anything that you want to talk about that's new coming up, please go right ahead.
So a couple different things. Yeah, thank you for letting me. So a couple different things. So one, I'm adapting the book, The Talisman, the Stephen King book, for Amblin, Steven Spielberg's company. So I'm in the process of writing that adaptation. Hopefully that's one that gets made. I mean, because that's one that Spielberg's tried to have, I think, like 2 or 3 different times over the years.
Right.
And it's never come to fruition. So knock on wood, this is the time it will.
No, knock on
the
table there.
All right.
Or knock on the
little typewriter? Even better.
Old school.
So there's that, and then I just, a movie I wrote called Greenland, starring Gerard Butler, just wrapped, shot down in Atlanta. And so I was down there for that for a little while on set, and I don't know, I'm liking what I'm seeing, so that's.
And I mentioned I just saw Angel Has Fallen a few nights ago.
Yeah.
And go back to Greenland, go back to that, because Gerard Butler in this movie I just saw was awesome. And it was kind of like an old school, late 80s, mid 90s, big time movie, Morgan Freeman as the president. I mean, explosions, espionage, backstabbing, the big duel at the end. I guess I'm giving away the whole movie, but
that's okay.
Angel Has Fallen was a lot of fun. So I'm happy for you that you're working with people that are involved in that.
Yeah, and then the director of that movie is also the director on Greenland, a guy named Rick Roman Watt, who is, I mean, he did Shot Caller, he did Snitch, so he has a real muscularity to the movies. He's a former stuntman, and so I think that kind of factors into the way he does action-related movies. You can see it's very visceral stuff. So hopefully that is the case with Greenland as well.
Well, Mike Messier is available for this project.
Oh, there you
go. My acting will be linked into the end of the show. I'm just happy for you, Chris. And I know if we could mention without too many specifics, how's your family doing? They're doing good?
Good. We're, like I said, we're happily living our life in Rhode Island, and I'm very lucky in that most of my family's still here, and my friends are, and it's just. Yeah, the summer just ended officially, I guess, today, you can say.
September 3rd.
Yeah, and things are good.
And it's just great because, you and I kind of run in the same circles. I'll see you, and sometimes I don't even bother you because you've got your computer, and I'm sure whatever you're doing is big-time stuff. So I'll just give you your space because I know that you're probably either writing a script or writing an email. And
most times,
people don't even think about that. Like, how much hours goes into these emails, these pitch emails. The other day, I wrote a representation of an actor that I like, and I said, man, I just want to take a shot at this. I know it's the harpoon in the ocean to send this email to someone unsolicited, and I even said in my email, I know this is unsolicited, that's why I'm not sending you a script, but I have a project that I think your talent would be interested in. And the guy was really nice. He wrote back within the hour. So sorry, I'm swamped right now. I can't, I said, hey, you know what? That was, to me, that's still a success because
it is. You're right. Because most times it ends up in the abyss and you don't hear anything. So yeah, it is.
Right, but the guy was nice enough to just give me that. And as far as my own stuff, I'm looking forward to Avalonia Festival. I wanted to show off the T-shirt because, as you're talking about, people creating their own projects. In my festival, Avalonia Festival, which is a film festival, there's a project for monologues, and one actor movie or monologues. So I have a category that actors can take their smartphone and tape themselves doing a monologue, and they can win an award for that.
Oh, very cool.
Right. So it's not an Emmy or an Oscar, but it's a lot of this industry, I think, Chris, is people have to give themselves motivation to continue because it's so hard. So whether it's a Twitter like or some famous actor retweeted me, sometimes you need that emotional fuel to keep yourselves engaged.
A little bit of validation goes a long way. I agree.
Right. Now, let me ask you this: we got about 3 minutes left. do you have a mantra for the end of 2019, already looking forward to 2020 and all these big projects, Greenland, everything. Do you have a mantra you want to share with the audience?
So, I mean, just so I know specifically, so you mean something, words that I live by, or just...
Words that you live by, or a quote that you like, or maybe just a work ethic, you know?
Yeah, I would say that it's nothing formulated to the point of being, say, a quote or anything else like that. But for me, it's always about appreciating where you are, taking some time to enjoy the view from whatever rung you've climbed to, because there's always a desire for me anyway, and I'm sure a lot of people, to always climb the next rung.
Right.
It's striking that balance of being able to stop once in a while and appreciate it, take a breath, smell the roses, so to speak, and then, but at the same time of avoiding complacency, kind of keeping that work ethic alive.
Is that a male ego thing, perhaps a balance of, hey, I just made this movie, I'm very happy about it, but oh gee whiz, if we had just done this? Is that like a thing with the artist, or I said male ego because a friend of mine, Tommy Danucci, and I were talking about this last night. It's like I was very happy last night doing work on my computer and listening to a podcast, and then I stopped myself and said, man, I've got to watch this show on Amazon Prime right now to soak in the hours of the day. It's like almost a restlessness that there can't be complacency, and can that be too much? Can that snake bite someone?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that's unique to just men. I mean, my wife is the same way, so I mean, I can certainly say it's not unique just to men. But I think it's kind of falls to human nature, maybe part of our culture, as our American culture is very work all the time, and yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, this is an industry driven by fear. I'll just leave it at that. It's like everyone is afraid that the success that they've gained is going to go away.
Right.
And so you're basically self-employed. So you know that the time that you're not working is time you're not moving ahead and potentially falling back. And you lack the security of, say, a more standard job where you say, hey, I wake up, my job's going to be there in theory, barring major layoffs. I'm going to go there Monday through Friday. I'm going to get my paycheck at the end of the week. That's not how this industry works for the most part. And so in that industry driven by fear, you sometimes do have to recognize, all right, I've worked this hard. It is okay once in a while to not be so afraid that I have to keep working.
Well, Chris, this has been a lot of fun. I'm still driving myself nuts trying to remember the name of that. One of your first projects had the word like last or battle or something in it. As soon as we get off the air,
we'll talk about it. Yeah, I'm not sure. The U-boats, and I don't know.
It's driving me nuts. But I thought you had something that was on an HBO special or Showtime or something like that. But we'll look back at the private.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Chris Sparling, thank you so much.
Mike, thank you.
Best of luck with 2019 and 20.
Likewise.
Thank you for watching Messier Mantra. We'll see you next time.